He was called a matricide, a monster who beheaded the very goddess that gave him life. He was a shamed fugitive, a loser in court who fled into the desert, and a humiliated victim who was dominated by his enemy. And yet, he was worshipped as the perfect king, the divine symbol of every pharaoh, and revered as the very soul of justice and order for thousands of years. His name was Horus. How could a god stained by the ultimate crimes and degradations become the supreme icon of righteousness? Now imagine a world bathed in the golden light of the desert sun, where gods walked among mortals, and the balance of the cosmos hung precariously on the whims of divine power. That was ancient Egypt, a land of awe-inspiring temples, enigmatic pharaohs, and a pantheon of deities whose stories were woven into the very fabric of daily life. This wasn't just a belief system, it was the operating system of their entire world. And in that world, there was a memory of a first time, Zep Tepi, an age when the gods themselves ruled directly on earth, establishing the very order that humanity would later inherit. At the pinnacle of this divine earthly rule was the first family. They were the grandchildren of the creator god Adam, the children of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. There were 4 of them, 2 brothers, Osiris and Seth, and 2 sisters, Isis and Nephthys. Osiris was the firstborn, the golden child. He was everything good, everything ordered, everything civilized. He was the god of agriculture, the one who taught humanity how to stop their nomadic wanderings, how to plant grain, and crucially, how to brew beer. He was the god of life, of fertile green growth, of the rich black Kemet, the black land, left by the Nile's predictable flood. He was tall, handsome, and benevolent. He was the very picture of Mayat, the fundamental cosmic principle of truth, justice, balance, and order. He was, in every sense, the perfect king, and he married the perfect queen, his sister, Isis. Isis was not merely a consort, she was his equal in brilliance and power. Her name is a Greek rendering, but her Egyptian name, Aset, is often written with the hieroglyph for a throne. She wasn't just on the throne, she was the throne. She was the seat of power, the legitimizing force of the king. She was the goddess of magic, of wisdom, of motherhood, and of a fierce, unwavering loyalty that would soon be tested beyond all measure. Together, Osiris and Isis ruled over a golden age. The harvests were bountiful, the people were happy, and the world was in perfect balance. But balance requires an opposite, and that opposite was Seth. If Osiris was the fertile black land, Seth was the Dishret, the vast, sterile, terrifying red land of the desert that surrounded it. He was the god of chaos, of violent storms, of foreigners, and of untamable, unpredictable rage. He was red-haired, immensely powerful, and possessed a wild, dangerous energy. He was the necessary chaos that defined the borders of order. He married their other sister, Nephthys, the lady of the house, but it was a troubled pairing. While Osiris was loved and celebrated, Seth was feared and respected. A god you appeased, not one you invited to a festival. And in the heart of Seth, this necessary chaos curdled into something far darker: jealousy. He watched his perfect brother, the celebrated king, and a bitter, acidic envy began to consume him. Why did Osiris get the throne, the love, the fertile land, while he, Seth, the stronger of the two, was relegated to the burning, empty sands? This wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was a cosmic imbalance waiting to erupt. The Golden Age was built on a fault line, and Seth was about to apply the pressure. That cosmic imbalance was about to explode, birthing Horus's destiny from a moment of profound devastation. Seth's plan was not a simple, straightforward murder. It was a calculated act of public humiliation, a piece of dark, elaborate theater. He threw a magnificent feast for the gods. The wine flowed, music played, and the divine court celebrated the prosperity of Egypt. The highlight of the evening, Seth announced, was a game. He unveiled a magnificent chest, a sarcophagus of unparalleled beauty, crafted from the finest cedar and inlaid with gold and ebony. "A gift," Seth proclaimed, his voice booming over the music. "A prize for the one god who fits this chest perfectly." One by one, the gods tried. One was too tall, another too broad. It was a merry, drunken party game. Finally, it was Osiris's turn. He, the picture of divine perfection, stepped into the chest and lay down. He fitted it precisely as if it had been made for him, because of course it had. It was a trap. In that instant, the music stopped. Before Osiris could react, Seth and his 72 conspirators slammed the heavy lid shut, the thud echoing in the suddenly silent hall. They hammered it closed, pouring molten lead into the seams to seal it, transforming the beautiful gift into a dark, suffocating coffin. The king of the living was trapped, suffocating in the dark. Seth and his followers, now in open rebellion, hoisted the chest onto their shoulders, marched it to the banks of the Nile, and with a great terrible heave, hurled it into the water. The good king was gone, his body now a piece of driftwood, his soul the Ba, unable to find his body, and thus unable to reach the afterlife. This was Seth's true victory, not just murder, in which the soul could be judged, but obliteration. Chaos had won. Seth, the usurper, seized the throne. The news shattered Isis. Her husband wasn't just dead, he was lost. She tore her royal robes, cut her long, beautiful hair, and smeared her face with the black mud of the Nile banks. She was no longer a queen. She was a widow. But even in the deepest sorrow, hope found a way. Isis, the devoted wife, a goddess of unparalleled magic and unwavering love, refused to accept this grim fate. Her grief was immense, but her resolve was stronger. She embarked on a desperate, perilous quest. She wandered Egypt. Her sister Nephthys, who, in a profound act of courage, had abandoned her monstrous husband Seth, at her side. They were two women, symbols of all widows, searching for the lost. Isis questioned everyone. She searched every marsh, every tributary. Her magic allowed her to understand the whispers of the wind, the language of the birds. Finally, she learned the chest's fate. It had not remained in Egypt. The Nile had carried it out to the Great Green, the Mediterranean, where it had floated for miles, finally washing ashore in the distant port of Byblos in modern-day Lebanon. There, a miraculous tamarisk tree had sprouted, growing with supernatural speed, and its trunk had enveloped the chest, sealing the dead king inside. The local king, amazed by this colossal fragrant tree, had it cut down and made into the central load-bearing pillar of his new palace, unaware of the divine corpse entombed within. Isis journeyed to Byblos. She didn't arrive as a queen, but as a humble, grieving woman. She sat by the city well, weeping silently, until the queen's own handmaidens came to draw water. Isis, in her disguised state, wove their hair with such skill and breathed such a divine perfume upon them that the queen, intrigued, summoned this mysterious stranger. Isis was brought to the palace and, finding favor, was made the nursemaid to the queen's infant son. Isis, her own heart empty and grieving, poured her love into this mortal child. In a strange, secret act of gratitude, she began to make the prince immortal, not through magic, but through fire. Each night she would place the child in the great hearth's flames to burn away his mortality. One night, the queen, her curiosity piqued, followed Isis and saw her son lying in the embers. She screamed in terror, breaking the spell. Isis, her cover blown, rose to her full divine height. The grieving nursemaid was gone, and in her place stood the majestic, terrifying queen of the gods. "Fool," she roared, her voice echoing with power, "I was granting your son eternal life, but you have broken it." The terrified king and queen offered her anything to appease her. Isis asked for only one thing, the great pillar that held up their roof. They granted her request. Isis cut open the pillar, retrieved the chest, and set sail back to Egypt, her beloved's body finally in her possession. She hid deep in the papyrus swamps of the Nile Delta, a place called Chemis, a labyrinth of reeds and water that Seth would never find. There, she opened the lid. She looked upon the face of her husband, and with her great magic, her heart breaking, she took the form of a kite, a small, swift falcon. She fluttered over his inert form, fanning her wings, breathing the air of life back into his lungs, speaking the spells of revival. And in a final desperate act of love and magic, she temporarily revived Osiris, just long enough to conceive a child. With Horus grown to manhood, the time for hiding was over. The boy who had been forged in the marshes, tempered by poison and his mother's fierce, desperate love, was now a powerful young god. He was tall and strong, his eyes holding the piercing, far-seeing gaze of the falcon, but also the deep, lingering shadows of his hunted childhood. He was no longer a child to be hidden. He was an heir demanding his birthright. The moment had come. Isis, her role as protector now shifting to that of advocate, took her son by the hand. She emerged from the labyrinthine swamps of Chemis, leaving behind the only home Horus had ever known, and traveled to the celestial court of the gods. She presented him before the great Ennead, the divine tribunal of the most powerful gods, presided over by the ancient mighty Ra, the sun god, in his form of Re Horakti, Re Horus of the two horizons. Imagine the scene. The greatest gods of the cosmos assembled. There was Ra, the creator and king, his face weary from eons of sailing the sky, his judgment the final word. There was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and writing, the divine scribe who recorded all things, and whose voice was the very essence of reason and law. There was Shu, the god of air, the first son of the creator, and his sister wife Tefnut. And there, on the defendant's throne, sat Seth. He was no longer just the god of chaos. He was the king. He was muscular, powerful, and arrogant, his red-rimmed eyes glinting with contempt. He had been ruling Egypt in his own chaotic way for decades. He was the incumbent. Then Isis entered, no longer a grieving widow in rags, but a queen demanding justice. And beside her stood Horus. Isis spoke, her voice clear and ringing with a mother's conviction. "Behold," she cried, "here is the son of Osiris. Here is Horus, the Hornej Itef, the avenger of his father. He is the rightful heir to the throne of the two lands, stolen by the murderer, the usurper, Seth." The case was laid. The stage was set for one of the most epic and prolonged conflicts in all of ancient mythology, the contendings of Horus and Seth. This wasn't a single battle. It was a cosmic legal dispute, a series of brutal duels, magical confrontations, and cunning psychological warfare that would drag on for 80 long years. On paper, the case was simple. Horus was the son of the previous king. By all laws of inheritance, divine and mortal, the throne was his. Thoth, the god of wisdom, made this point immediately. "It is the law," he said in his reedy, precise voice. "The son's right is clear. The throne belongs to Horus, son of Osiris." But it was not simple at all. Seth, ever the brute, made his own argument, an argument of pure, undeniable power. The throne, he roared, this boy, this whining child from the swamps, he is not even legitimate. His father was dead when he was conceived. He is a product of filthy magic, a bastard of the reeds. Look at him. He is weak, untested. I am Seth. I am strength. I am the one who stands on the prow of Ra's great boat every night and slays the chaos serpent Apep. I protect the cosmos. This boy can't even protect himself. The throne is too heavy for him. It belongs to the strong, and I am the strongest. The gods were divided. Many of the elder gods, the ones who valued strength and utility above all, nodded in agreement with Seth. And then the Chief Justice, Ra himself, spoke. The god Seth is right, he grumbled. The entire tribunal was stunned. Seth is strong, and he is useful. This boy, his name is Horus, but he has done nothing. He whines and he clings to his mother's skirt. Ra, in his old age, was notoriously irritable, and he had a particular dislike for Isis, who he found to be a meddling, overly emotional schemer. Isis, hearing this, was enraged. Thoth was appalled. The legal battle was at a stalemate. The tribunal was deadlocked for years. The gods argued, they debated, they shouted, and all the while, Seth sat on the throne, smirking. The conflict, unable to be resolved by law, now had to be resolved by other means. It became a series of contests, a divine decathlon to prove who was more worthy. First, they tried a magical boat race. Seth, overconfident, proposed a race in boats made of stone. Horus, being his mother's son, was clever. He secretly built a boat of pine wood, but covered it with a thin plaster of gypsum, painted to look exactly like granite. Seth, meanwhile, with his brute force approach, simply hacked off the top of a mountain and fashioned it into a crude stone boat. The race began. Horus's boat, light and fast, sailed beautifully. Seth's massive stone boat, of course, sank like, well, a stone. Seth, furious at being tricked, transformed himself into a hippopotamus and attacked Horus's boat, shattering it. The battle was a draw, and the gods were no closer to a decision. The skirmishes grew more vicious, more personal. The legal dispute was devolving into a brawl. Finally, Seth, a god of violence, proposed a contest he was sure he could win. Enough of these tricks, he bellowed. Let us settle this with strength and endurance. Let us both transform into hippopotamuses and submerge ourselves in the great Nile. The first one to surface in defeat loses the throne, and we shall stay down for 3 months. Horus, young and proud, could not refuse a direct challenge to his strength. He agreed. The two great gods, the falcon and the lord of chaos, took on the forms of massive hippos and plunged into the depths of the river. The tribunal watched, the gods waited, and Isis waited on the bank, her heart a cold stone of terror in her chest. Days turned into weeks. The water was still. She was a mother. She had spent his entire childhood protecting him from scorpions, from crocodiles, from illness, and now she had let him go, willingly, into a contest of brute strength with the monster who had murdered her husband. She couldn't bear it. Her resolve cracked. The thought of losing her son, the only thing she had left of Osiris, the child she had conceived in defiance of death itself, was too much. She had to act. Her magic was her strength. She went to a forge and with her spells fashioned a great copper harpoon, a barbed spear of divine, unyielding metal. She tied it to a long, strong rope. She went to the bank where the water churned slightly, where she sensed the two great forms were grappling in the dark mud below. She lifted the harpoon, took aim, and threw it with all her divine strength. The spear plunged into the water, and a moment later a great form surfaced, roaring in pain. It was Horus. The harpoon was embedded deep in his side. "Mother!" he cried, his voice a mixture of agony and pure, uncomprehending betrayal. Why? Why do you strike me? I am your son." Isis was horrified. In her panic, she had struck the very person she was trying to save. My son, I did not mean it," she cried. She used her magic, speaking the words of healing, and the spear, of its own accord, unhooked itself from his flesh. The wound closed. Horus, wounded in body and spirit, sank back down to continue the fight. Isis, shaking, took up the harpoon again. She had to end this. She threw it once more. This time another redder form surfaced, bellowed in agony. It was Seth. The harpoon had found its mark. "Isis!" he roared. "Sister, how can you strike me? I am your brother. What have I ever done to you but what a brother does?" This appeal, this monstrous, manipulative, gaslighting question from the man who had dismembered their other brother, somehow worked. He was, in the end, her brother, the same blood. They had been born of the same mother, Nut, at the same time. His plea, however false, touched a deep, ancient chord of kinship. Her heart, so full of love for her son, was also capable of a strange, complex pity for her enemy. She couldn't do it. She couldn't be the one to deliver the killing blow. "Be released," she whispered. And with her magic, she commanded the harpoon to let him go. Horus, watching this from the water, seeing his mother show mercy to his father's murderer, the monster who had hunted him his entire life, snapped. This was the breaking point. The trauma of his childhood, the poison, the hiding, the weight of his destiny, the wound from his mother's own spear, and now this final, incomprehensible act of mercy. It was too much. He was consumed by a fit of pure, primal, unthinking rage. He was no longer a god. He was a wounded animal. He roared, a sound that was not human or divine, and leapt from the water. He lunged not at Seth, but at her, at his mother, and in one terrible, swift, shocking motion, Horus, the avenger of his father, cut off his mother's head. The gods on the bank cried out in horror. The contest was over. The cosmos itself reeled. This was not justice. This was not Ma'at. This was chaos as pure as anything Seth had ever done. Horus, his rage spent, looked at what he had done, at the body of his mother, the woman who had given him life twice over, lying headless on the bloody sand. The horror of his own act crashed down on him. He fled, running into the desert, into Seth's own territory to hide in shame. Thoth, the wise one, the healer, rushed to Isis's side. He could not let the goddess of magic, the throne of Egypt, be gone. He found her body, and with his own powerful magic, he healed her. He fashioned a new head for her, or in some versions, placed the beautiful head of a cow upon her shoulders with a solar disk between its horns. From that moment on, Isis became inextricably linked with Hathor, the great cow goddess of love, motherhood, and the sky. She was reborn, changed by her son's violence. The trial was in shambles. Horus was a fugitive, a matricide. Seth was by default the winner. The throne seemed his for good. This was Horus's lowest point. But the story and the contendings were far from over. It was about to get stranger. Seth, ever the opportunist, went hunting for his shamed, defeated nephew. He found Horus in an oasis, weeping and self-loathing, and Seth, realizing he couldn't beat Horus in a fair fight, as Isis's spear had proven, and that Horus had just disqualified himself from the legal fight, decided on a different tactic. He would not just defeat Horus, he would dominate him. He would humiliate him so completely, so utterly, that he could never again hold his head up in the divine court. He approached Horus, not with anger, but with a strange, predatory kindness. "Come," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "You are beaten. The fight is over. Come to my palace. Let us make merry. Let us put this feud behind us for one night." Horus, at the absolute bottom of his despair, confused, ashamed, and utterly alone, was vulnerable. He warily, foolishly agreed. That night at Seth's palace, as Horus slept, Seth made his move. We must be very clear about this moment. In the ancient world, this was not an act of passion or desire. It was a pure, cold, political act of dominance. In the Egyptian and wider ancient worldview, the active, penetrating partner was dominant and masculine. The passive, penetrated partner was female, submissive, and weak. By doing this, Seth was attempting to prove in the most visceral way possible that Horus was unfit to rule. He was not a king, a pharaoh. He was a woman, a weakling. Seth planned to go to the tribunal and declare, "I have dominated him. He is my subordinate. He cannot be king." But Seth had underestimated his nephew. Horus was his mother's son. He was a creature of cunning, not just strength. Horus, realizing what was happening, did not fight back. He didn't panic. He thought. And in a moment of quick, desperate cleverness, he cupped his hands and caught Seth's semen before it could touch his body. He had not been defiled. He had only been assaulted. And he held the evidence in his hand. As soon as Seth was gone, Horus ran. He ran from the palace, his hand contaminated, his mind reeling, and he went straight to the one person he knew could fix this, his mother. He found Isis now in her new form and threw himself at her feet, showing her his hand. He told her what Seth had done, and Isis, the mother he had decapitated, looked at her broken, humiliated son. And she did not weep. She did not rage. She went cold with a brilliant, calculating, terrifying fury. This was her true element. This was a battle of wits, of magic, of humiliation, and no one was better at it than Isis. Her countermove was a masterpiece of strategic revenge. First, she took a copper knife, the same metal as her harpoon. She grabbed her son's defiled hand and she cut it off at the wrist, throwing the contaminated flesh into the marsh. Then, with her great magic, she healed the stump and grew him a new, clean, perfect hand. "Now," she said, her voice like ice, "for your uncle." She took Horus, and by her magic, she collected his own divine solar seed. Then she went to Seth's garden. She knew her brother. She knew his habits, his appetites. She knew his absolute, all-consuming favorite food was wild lettuce. For the Egyptians, this plant, which was tall, straight, and exuded a milky, semen-like sap when cut, was a powerful aphrodisiac and a symbol of hypermasculinity, deeply associated with Seth. Isis took her son's seed and she spread it carefully and deliberately all over the crisp, fresh leaves of Seth's favorite lettuce patch. That evening, Seth, the great, powerful god of chaos, returned to his palace feeling triumphant. He had, he thought, finally broken his nephew. He went to his garden for his favorite snack, and, oblivious, he ate the lettuce, consuming his nephew's seed. The next day, the divine tribunal was reconvened. Seth strode into the center of the hall, arrogant, victorious, a cruel smirk on his face. "The case is closed," he roared for all the gods to hear. "The throne is mine, by right of strength and by right of dominance. I have performed the ultimate act of submission upon the boy Horus. He is weak. He is a woman. He is unfit to rule. Ask him what I did to him last night." The gods were aghast. This was a shocking, vulgar claim. All eyes turned to Horus. Horus, standing tall, his new hand at his side, his face calm, simply said, "That is not so. What my uncle claims is a lie. But I agree. Let us settle this. Let us find the truth." The gods were confused. It was one god's word against another. How could this be proven? Thoth, the god of wisdom and the divine scribe, stepped forward. "The gods' seeds are divine," he declared. "They are part of them. They will answer when called. Let us call upon the seeds and see where they answer from." A murmur of agreement went through the hall. This was a good magical legal test. Thoth turned, his ibis beak pointed at the assembly. "Let the gods call out, 'Come forth, seed of Seth.'" The gods shouted, "Come forth, seed of Seth." And from the marsh, outside the hall, from the bottom of the river where Isis had thrown Horus's hand, a tiny, watery voice answered, "Here I am." Seth's face went pale. His act of dominance, his proof, was in a swamp. It had never even touched his rival. He was stunned. He was humiliated. He had been tricked. But the humiliation was not yet complete. Thoth turned again. "Now," he said, his voice rising, "let the gods call out, 'Come forth, seed of Horus.'" The gods shouted, "Come forth, seed of Horus." And from inside Seth, a voice answered, "Here I am." In that instant, a great golden disk, the solar divine seed of Horus, burst forth from Seth's forehead, shining like a new sun. The hall was silent. The humiliation was absolute. Seth, the god of hypermasculine chaotic power, the one who had tried to dominate, had been the one dominated. He had been tricked. He had been, in a cosmic and legal sense, impregnated by his nephew. He was the female partner. He was the one who was unfit. This was the turning point. Brute force had been utterly, publicly, and ridiculously defeated by cunning. Isis, the mother, the magician, the strategist, had won the case for her son. The gods erupted. Some were laughing, some were horrified, but the case was clear. Seth's claim, his entire argument of might makes right, was shattered. But the war was not over. Seth, stripped of his legal standing, his dignity, and his argument, had only one thing left: pure, unrestrained, chaotic violence. The contendings were about to enter their final, bloodiest phase. The great hall of the Ennead was in chaos. The gods were shouting, some in horrified laughter, others in open disgust. Seth, the great red god of chaos, stood frozen, his hand instinctively moving to his forehead, where a golden solar disk of light had just burst forth, a shining, undeniable, and deeply humiliating testament to his total defeat. He had been the one penetrated, the one dominated, the one made female in this cosmic legal battle. His entire case, built on the bedrock of his superior strength and hypermasculinity, had not just been dismissed, it had been inverted and shattered. He was a cosmic joke, and in that moment of absolute public humiliation, something inside Seth broke. The last vestige of the politician, the debater, the contestant, was burned away. All that remained was the pure, primal, and terrifying essence of his nature, the Deshre, the red land, the chaotic storm, the unthinking, destructive rage. His red-rimmed eyes, which had been wide with shock, narrowed into slits of pure, murderous hatred. The smirk was gone, replaced by a bared-teeth snarl that was more animal than God. A low growl rumbled in his chest, so powerful it shook the very pillars of the celestial hall. He was no longer a defendant. He was a natural disaster. "My seed," he whispered, his voice choked. And then he roared. It was not a word. It was a sound of pure negation, a blast of chaotic energy that sent the minor gods flying backward. "You," he bellowed, his gaze locking onto Horus, who stood shocked by his mother's side. This was no longer a trial. This was a war. Seth lunged. He didn't wait for a verdict. He didn't care about the Ennead or the throne. All he cared about was destroying the source of his shame. He moved with a speed that defied his massive frame, a red blur of violence. The 80-year-long contendings had just entered their final bloody, desperate phase. Horus, son of a murdered king, but also a warrior trained in the harsh realities of the swamp, reacted instantly. He was no longer the small, frightened child. He pushed his mother, Isis, behind him and drew the divine Kepesh, a sickle sword that Thoth had granted him. The Falcon Prince met the chaotic storm head-on. The clash of their weapons, their very being, sent a shockwave through the cosmos. This wasn't a fight confined to a divine hall. It was a battle that now raged across the whole of creation. They tore the sky. They fought on mountaintops, shattering peaks with their blows. They plunged into the Nile, their struggle boiling the mighty river. They were two equal, opposite forces locked in a fight to the death. Horus was swift, clever, and precise, the falcon of the two horizons, his movements the strike of a bird of prey. But Seth was raw, unthinking, untiring power. He was strength without limit, without reason. He was a god who fought dirty. For days the battle raged. Horus, for all his skill and divine right, was tiring. He was fighting an opponent who felt no pain, no exhaustion, only rage. Seth was a berserker, a creature of pure, destructive instinct. And in a moment of desperate, close combat, on the sands of the desert, Seth's home turf, the red god finally broke through Horus's guard. He didn't use a weapon. He used his bare hands. He lunged at Horus, his massive fingers spread like talons. Horus tried to dodge, but Seth was too fast. He grabbed Horus's head, his thumbs digging into his nephew's face, and, in one final horrific, desperate act of violation, Seth plunged his fingers into Horus's left eye socket. Horus screamed. It was a sound of such profound physical agony that it dwarfed even his mother's cry from the swamp. Seth tore the eye from his nephew's skull. This was not just a physical mutilation. It was a cosmic catastrophe. Horus's eyes were not just organs of sight. His right eye was the sun, brilliant, powerful, and constant. His left eye was the moon, the Ea, waxing and waning, a symbol of healing, time, and cyclical knowledge. When Seth tore that eye out, he was not just blinding his rival. He was attacking the very order of the universe. He had murdered his brother, the god of the fertile earth, and now he had mutilated his nephew, the god of the sky. He had extinguished the moon. The world was plunged into a sudden, terrifying, and total darkness. The stars, without the moon's gentle light, looked cold and terrifying. Time itself, measured by the lunar cycles, shuddered to a halt. Maat was not just broken, it was shattered. Seth stood, panting, his red fur matted with sweat and ichor. He held the eye in his hand. It was a perfect, glowing, pearl-like sphere, pulsating with a soft lunar light. And in his final act of desecration, mirroring what he had done to his brother, he began to tear it apart. He ripped it into 6 pieces, or perhaps 64. The texts are fragmented like the eye itself. He tore it to bits and, with a final triumphant roar, he scattered the pieces across the length of Egypt, throwing them into the Nile, into the desert, into the mountains, ensuring it could never be made whole again. He had repeated his father's crime upon the sun. Horus lay on the sand, blinded, mutilated, and defeated, bleeding in the darkness he had inadvertently caused. The contendings were over. Chaos had, at last, truly won. But Seth, in his triumph, had once again underestimated the allies his rival possessed. The universe, which had stopped for Horus as a child, would not abandon him now. The first to find him was not his mother, Isis, but the gentle, powerful goddess Hathor, the lady of the southern sycamore. She was, in some tales, Horus's wife, the goddess of love, beauty, and joy. In others, she was the cow-headed goddess now conflated with Isis. She found him collapsed, his empty eye socket a bleeding black void. Her heart broke. She, the goddess of joy, looked upon this ultimate sorrow. She cradled the young god's head in her lap. She did not have the magic to heal the cosmic wound, but she could heal the physical one. She went to her sacred gazelles, drew their milk, a substance of pure magic and nourishment, and she poured it into the empty socket, soothing the pain, healing the flesh, and giving him the strength to endure. But the eye, the moon, was still missing. The world was still in darkness. This was a job not for love, but for wisdom. It was a job for Thoth, the ibis-headed god, the divine scribe, the master of mathematics, medicine, and magic, set out on a new quest. He had to find the scattered fragments of the moon. He searched the entire world, his keen eyes scanning the darkness. With his precise, patient mind, he found the pieces, one by one. He found the piece in the river, the piece on the mountain, the piece in the desert. He gathered them, but they were just broken shards. They did not fit together. They were dead. This is where Thoth's true genius came to the fore. The eye, in its shattered form, became a system of divine mathematics. The pieces were not just pieces, they were fractions. The largest piece was 1/2, the next 1/4, the next 1/8, then 1/16, 1/32, and the smallest fragment 1/64. Thoth, the great mathematician, put them all together. But he had a problem. He added them up. 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 plus 1/32 and 1/64. The total was only 63/64. One part was missing. The 1/64th part of the eye was gone forever, perhaps eaten by a fish, just as his father's phallus had been. The eye was, like Osiris, incomplete. It could not be made whole by simple mathematics. But Thoth was not just the god of mathematics. He was the god of magic. If the eye could not be completed by natural law, it would be completed by divine intervention. Thoth took the 63/64 parts, and using his own divine spittle, his own magical essence, he created the missing 1/64. He breathed on the fragments, spoke the great words of healing, and bound the pieces together. The eye was restored. It glowed with a new, powerful light. It was no longer just the moon. It was the Wedjat, the whole one, the healed one. It was a profound, powerful symbol. It was not a symbol of perfection, of never being broken. It was a symbol of being shattered and becoming whole again. It was a symbol of healing, of restoration, of the idea that which is broken can be mended, and in its mending become even more powerful, more sacred than it was before. It was the ultimate triumph of order and wisdom over chaos and fragmentation. Thoth took the Wedjat eye, and he went to Horus, who was now healed in body but not in spirit. He presented the glowing, magical whole eye to the young god. And here, Horus faced a choice. What would he do with this new immense power? Would he hunt down Seth and destroy him? Would he seize the throne by force? He did neither. He showed in this one profound act why he was the true king, why he was the embodiment of Ma'at. His first thought was not of himself, not of revenge, and not of power. It was of his father. Horus took the Wedjat eye, this symbol of his own suffering and magical restoration, and he journeyed. He left the world of the living, the realm of the gods, and he traveled the dark, perilous paths to the Duat, the underworld. He went to the silent, shadowy kingdom where his father Osiris reigned as the Lord of the Dead. He found his father, the great green-skinned god, sitting on his dark throne, a just but incomplete king. Osiris, the god of life, was trapped in the land of death, and Horus the son knelt before his father. He did not ask for help. He did not complain of his own battle. He came to give. He held up the glowing Wedjat eye, and he offered it to his father. In some versions, He gave it to Osiris to eat, feeding him his own divine essence. In others, he placed the glowing moon into his father's own empty socket. This single profound act of filial piety, of pure sacrifice, was the final key. The Wedjat eye, the symbol of wholeness and life, entered the Lord of the Dead, and in that moment, Osiris was truly reborn. He was no longer just a spectral king, a shade. The Wedjat filled him with a new, potent, eternal life. He was made whole in the afterlife. The son, who had lost his own eye fighting for his father's legacy, had used his own healed but scarred wholeness to complete his father. This was the ultimate fulfillment of the motif. The throne was not just won by the son's blood, it was won by the son's eye, by his sacrifice for the father. The cycle was complete. The father had, through Isis, given the son life. Now the son had given the father eternal life, and from his dark throne, Osiris, now fully empowered, could finally act. Back in the celestial hall, the gods were still in disarray. Ra, stubborn as ever, was still not fully convinced. The legal case was a mess. The mutilation was a crime, yes, but Seth was still strong. The deadlock impossibly remained. The gods, in their desperation, decided on one final appeal. They would write a letter. They would write to the only one who had not been heard from, the one whose opinion mattered most, the murdered king himself. Thoth, the divine scribe, penned a missive to the king of the dead, asking for his judgment. Who should rule? The reply from the underworld was swift, and it was terrifying. It was not a plea, it was a threat. Osiris, now brimming with the power of the Wedjat, wrote back to the Ennead. I am Osiris, his letter began, the lord of the afterlife, the king of the dead. And I am also the Neper, the god of grain, the god of the harvest. All that you eat, all the bread in your mouths, all the beer in your cups, it comes from me. Now answer me this, he continued, his words dripping with cold, eternal authority. Is it right? Is it just that my son Horus, my heir, should be denied his inheritance, while my murderer, his uncle, sits on my throne and feasts on my bounty? Shall the son's birthright be stolen? If you make the wrong choice, he concluded, if you deny me at this one last time, know this. My kingdom is full of messengers. They are swift, they are pitiless, and they are demonic, and they will obey me. I will unleash the demons of the Duat upon the world of the living. I will bring your perfect, sunlit world to ruin. The dead will walk the earth, and they will hunt the living. Now, choose. This was the end. The threat from the very source of life and death, the ultimate veto from the murdered king, could not be ignored. Ra, the sun god, finally truly relented. The case was over. The Ennead, united at last, spoke with one voice. The judgment was proclaimed by Thoth. The throne of the two lands, the throne of Geb, the inheritance of Osiris, is given to his son, Horus, the Avenger, the Wedjat, the Whole One. Horus, his eye restored, or perhaps he now ruled with one eye, the other given to his father, forever marked by his sacrifice, stood tall. Seth was brought before the tribunal, not as a defendant, but as a convict. He was defeated. He was forced to bow, to submit to the judgment. But chaos cannot be destroyed. It can only be contained. His fate was decided. He was banished to his Dishret, the Red Land, to rule the barren deserts and the foreign lands, to be the god of the outside, forever separate from the fertile, ordered Kemet. In another more nuanced ending, his immense chaotic strength was repurposed. He was given to Ra, to stand on the prow of the sun boat for all eternity, to use his violence not against his family, but against the ultimate chaos, Apep, protecting the sun god, and thus protecting Mayat in his own strange, violent way. And Horus, the falcon prince, the son of Isis, the heir of Osiris, finally, after 80 years of hiding, of battle, of mutilation, and of sacrifice, walked to the great throne. He was crowned, not with one crown, but with two. He was given the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, and they were combined into one, the Shent, the double crown. Horus, the unifier, the restorer, the rightful king, had taken his place. The golden age that Seth had shattered was restored. Ma'at had been broken, but like the Wedjat eye, it had been made whole again, stronger and more precious than before. The son had won his father's throne, and the soul of Egypt was at last at peace. But this is not where the story of Horus ends. In fact, it is precisely where it begins. The victory of Horus was not a single event, a myth to be told once and then filed away. It became the single most important story in 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization. It was not just their religion, it was their politics, their science, their art, and their very concept of the king. The contendings of Horus and Seth were not just a tale of the past. They were a divine charter, a political blueprint that was reenacted, relived, and reaffirmed by every single pharaoh who ever ruled the two lands. The cultural legacy of this victory is so profound that it is impossible to overstate. It permeated every aspect of ancient Egyptian life, starting with the king himself. First, and most critically, it solved the most dangerous question any kingdom can face: who gets to rule next? In a world of warlords and competing interests, a stable, peaceful transfer of power is the exception, not the rule. The myth of Horus created that exception and made it divine law. Here is how. From the moment a new king was crowned, he became Horus. He was the living Horus on earth. This was not a metaphor. It was a theological and political fact. His first and most important name in his long royal titulary was his Horus name, often written inside a sarek, a small icon representing the palace facade with the Horus falcon perched on top. This was his primary identity. He was not just a man, he was the living embodiment of the God who had fought chaos and won. He was the divine protector, the guardian of Ma'at. And what happened when that king died? He did not just die, he transitioned. The living Horus, upon his death, became Osiris, joining his father in the afterlife to become the new king of the Duat, the underworld, the just judge of all souls. And his son, the new heir, he, in turn, became the new living Horus. His first and most sacred duty as king was to perform the elaborate funeral rites for his dead father, the opening of the mouth ceremony, the mummification, the burial. In doing this, the new Horus was literally reenacting the role of Horus the Avenger. He was giving his father, the new Osiris, his eternal life, just as Horus had given the Wedjat eye to his father in the underworld. This act, the son bearing the father, was the final, crucial step in legitimizing his own rule. It was the ultimate fulfillment of the motif, the throne won by the son's blood for the father. This cycle, living king is Horus, dead king becomes Osiris, new king becomes Horus, was the divine engine that powered Egypt. It turned a potentially chaotic moment of succession into a sacred, stable, and predictable ritual. The myth provided an unshakable divine mandate for the royal family, an eternal justification for their power that was written into the fabric of the cosmos itself. But the legacy didn't stop at the palace gates. It entered the home of every single Egyptian, rich or poor, in the form of one of the most powerful and recognizable symbols in human history, the Eye of Horus. The Wedjat, the eye that had been ripped out, fragmented, and then magically restored, became the ultimate symbol. Its power, crucially, came not from its perfection, but from the very fact that it had been broken and mended. It was a profound paradox born from a moment of profound loss. It was a symbol of healing, of wholeness, of restoration, and of divine protection. It became the most ubiquitous amulet in all of Egypt. It was carved into tombs and temple walls. It was painted onto the sides of coffins, often a pair on the left side so the deceased, like Horus, could see their way out of the darkness and into the afterlife. It was worn by the living as a necklace or a ring, a powerful charm to ward off evil, to protect their health, and to bring them good fortune. It was the physical manifestation of the god's protection, a pocket-sized piece of divine magic. And, in a testament to the sheer genius of the Egyptian mind, the wedjat found its way into practical applications, embedding this sacred myth into the most mundane parts of their existence. The ancient Egyptians, in their sophisticated bureaucracy, needed a way to measure goods for quantities of grain, medicine, and land. They used a system of fractions, and the hieroglyphs they used for these fractions were the very parts of the wedjat eye. It was a stunningly elegant system. The entire eye was the whole. The parts of the eye, corresponding to the pieces Thoth had defined, were assigned values. The large R-shaped part was 1/2. The pupil was 1/4. The eyebrow was 1/8. The C-shaped part was 1/16. The leg was 1/32. And the final small piece was 1/64. When you add them all up, 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16 plus 1/32 plus 1/64 plus 1/32 and 1/64, you get 63/64. This flaw, as we now know, this flaw was not a mathematical error. It was a theological statement. That missing 1/64 represented the magical part, the piece that Thoth himself had to create to make the eye whole. It was a sacred, constant reminder that human systems, our mathematics, our medicine, our bureaucracy, are never perfect on their own. They are always, just slightly, incomplete. They always require a touch of the divine, a spark of Thoth's magic, to be made truly whole. Imagine a doctor mixing a prescription using these very fractions. He is not just measuring ingredients, he is, in a very real way, invoking the god of wisdom and the healing of Horus. The myth was not just a story, it was their science. So what does the story of Horus, the Falcon Prince, truly tell us? After the dust of the 80-year war has settled, after the crown is secured and the world is made whole, what is the essence of the god who remains? At his core, Horus is, and always was, the sky god. His very nature is to be above, to be all-seeing. His falcon form isn't just a majestic artistic choice. It represents a fundamental truth. He is the guardian, the protector, the one whose divine sight from the heavens oversees all of the land. His right eye, the sun, is the symbol of that clear, unchanging, life-giving power. His left eye, the moon, the wedjat, is the symbol of his journey, his suffering, and his hard-won wisdom. He is far-seeing justice, the swift, inescapable retribution that descends from the heavens upon the chaotic forces below. He is the guardian of the realm and the ultimate upholder of Mayat. His entire journey is the ultimate archetypal narrative of royal power. It is the divine blueprint that legitimizes the Pharaoh's rule, passed from father to son, sanctioned by divine will, and, most crucially, proven by sacrifice. The very image of the soaring falcon, forever vigilant, forever circling, perfectly encapsulates his role as the protector king. Now let's delve deeper into the tragedy and triumph that truly define his arc. This is where the story elevates itself from a simple myth into a profound piece of human and divine psychology. The loss of his eye, that visceral, horrific moment of personal violation, isn't merely a plot point in a battle. It is a powerful, enduring metaphor for the immense cost of power. It speaks to the brutal sacrifices demanded in the relentless pursuit of justice. This is not a story of a perfect hero who wins because he is flawless. Horus is deeply flawed. He is a god who, in a moment of pure, traumatized rage, decapitates his own mother. He is a god who is tricked, humiliated, and assaulted by his uncle. He is a god who knows shame, despair, and self-loathing, hiding in the desert after his own monstrous act. This makes him one of the most complex and relatable deities in any pantheon. He is not a flat, shining symbol of good. He is a being forged in trauma, and he has to overcome not only his external enemy, Seth, but also his own internal chaos. His journey teaches us that even divine beings must endure profound suffering, must bear the deepest scars to achieve their destiny. Yet this tragedy is not an end, it's a crucible. His ultimate victory over Seth, the restoration of his eye, and his rightful ascension to the throne aren't just triumphs over an antagonist. They are affirmations of order, a powerful message that even after the deepest cuts, wholeness and renewal are possible. This is the true meaning of the Wedjat. It is not a symbol of an eye that was never hurt. It is a symbol of an eye that was shattered and made whole again. It is a symbol of scar tissue, of a mended thing. And in its mending, it becomes more sacred, more potent than it was in its original perfect state. It is a profound illustration of how suffering can be transformed into strength, how a broken thing can, by the grace of wisdom, Thoth, and magic, Isis, become a source of ultimate protection. And then we return to our central motif, the narrative heartbeat of this entire epic, the throne won by the son's blood for the father. This isn't just a dramatic title, it's a deeply resonant philosophy of filial piety, of a son's sacred, unwavering duty to his lineage, and the inherent, often brutal, cost of securing a legitimate succession. It reflects the core of the ancient Egyptian view on divine kingship. Power was not simply inherited like a piece of furniture. It had to be earned. It had to be fought for. It had to be proven, often through blood, through a profound public demonstration of loyalty, strength, and cunning. It's a testament to their worldview, which saw the universe not as a peaceful, given thing, but as a constant, precarious balancing act. Ma'at, order, was not the default state. It was a fragile garden perpetually under threat from the Deshret, chaos, just beyond the banks, and it required a strong, vigilant, and battle-scarred king, a Horus, to stand guard. Think of one of the most successful narratives of our time, The Lion King. It is in almost every essential detail a retelling of the Horus myth. You have the good beloved king, Mufasa, Osiris, murdered by his jealous, cunning brother, Scar Seth. The rightful heir, Simba, Horus, is forced into exile, hiding in a marsh, the Hakuna Matata oasis, believing he is unworthy. He must then be reminded of his duty and his father's legacy, returning to fight his uncle in a final, bloody battle. His victory reclaims the throne and, crucially, restores the circle of life, the very definition of Ma'at. It is the exact same story, a testament to the timeless archetypal power of this Egyptian origina. These are not mere coincidences. They are reflections of a timeless human story, an archetypal struggle for identity, legacy, and justice that Horus, the Falcon Prince, first brought to vivid, tragic, and triumphant life thousands of years ago. His is a magnificent arc, a timeless saga that culminates in the restoration of order to a shattered world. He is the avenger, the protector, the unifier, whose ultimate victory over chaos established an eternal pattern for kingship and cosmic balance. The motif we've explored, the throne won by the Son's blood for the Father, conveys profound, enduring themes. On the surface, it is about duty, about the heavy price of sacrifice, and the ultimate, often violent, path to justice. But to leave it there is to miss the deeper, more subtle truth of the Egyptian mind. Horus's journey teaches us that true justice is not merely punitive, it is restorative. His final, most important acts were not acts of violence, but acts of healing. He healed his father by giving him the Wedjat. He and the gods healed the cosmos not by destroying Seth, but by containing him, by integrating his necessary chaotic energy into the divine order, giving him a new and vital job, protecting the sunboat. This is a worldview of profound maturity. It recognizes that the world is not a simple battleground of good versus evil, where one must annihilate the other. It is a complex, intricate balance of opposing forces, life and death, order and chaos, the river and the desert. And true Mayat, true harmony, is found in the balance of these forces, not in the destruction of one of them. Seth was not pure evil. He was imbalance. He was chaos in the wrong place. Horus's victory was to put him back in his proper place. This is why Horus stands as such a timeless symbol, not just of leadership and divine authority, but of resilience in the face of immense, soul-crushing adversity. His story is not a fairy tale. It is not the story of a perfect prince who was destined to win. It is the story of a refugee, a victim of trauma, a flawed and furious young man who had to fight for every scrap of his inheritance. He had to learn through pain and loss that his mother's cunning was just as powerful as his own strength, and that Thoth's wisdom was more powerful than both. He had to learn that the path to the throne was not a straight line, but a brutal, winding, 80-year-long ordeal. His journey teaches us that even when personal loss is profound, even when the world is plunged into darkness, even when our own eye is torn from our face, the spirit of determination, the courage to fight for what is right, can ultimately prevail. The Wedjat is his and our most powerful lesson. That which is broken can be mended. That our scars, our traumas, when healed by wisdom and magic, do not have to be a source of weakness. They can become a source of our greatest strength, a testament to our survival, a symbol of protection for all those who come after. Horus is a reminder that some legacies are worth fighting for, some orders are worth restoring, and that some duties transcend our own pain. His story, etched into the very stones of ancient Egypt, in the mathematical fractions of a farmer's grain measure, in the amulet worn by a child, in the titles of every pharaoh, continues to inspire, to inform, and to resonate. It proves that the tales of old are never truly gone. They are, in fact, the very DNA of the stories we still tell today. They simply await a new generation to listen, to learn, and to be inspired by the eternal, enduring, and hard-won legacy of the Falcon Prince,